honors, please? Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'm going to take off my coat because I'm already hot.
I just closed the window. Senator Rosenwald was cold.
No, you're fine. No, that's fine. We're good. If you're cold, no. I can always.
It's cold. I'm cold all the time.
All right.
What is that?
Mark's the
Okay,
second.
Mark, thanks.
Is he a hottie?
All right, so let's open up the hearing for HB 171. We'll hear from the prime sponsor.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's nice to see you looking well.
Nice
Glad
to be
to-
seen looking well. Thank you.
Glad to be here with you all again. For the record, I'm Representative Nick Germana. I represent Cheshire District 15. That's Chesterfield, Hinsdale, Keene, Wards 1 and 3 through 5, Walpole, Westmoreland, and Surrey. And I am the prime sponsor of HB 171. Now is the perfect time for us to enact a pause on landfill permitting in the state for two reasons that I'm going to talk about briefly this morning. First is that we do not have a capacity issue, and we are in a sweet spot as far as that goes. We are not going to see capacity need until at least the middle of the next decade. This pause will allow the Department of Environmental Services to receive landfill permits and to process them for completion so that if permits are submitted during the period of this moratorium, DES can make sure that they are complete and could then begin action on them as soon as the moratorium is over. So if we enact this now, it's a 3-year moratorium getting us through 2028. You're still looking at least 6 years before there is any concern about capacity. And it actually, in truth, is going to be well beyond that, because assuming that turnkey, that facility applies for an expansion, that is going to give us capacity even further out. So we're in the perfect moment where making this pause makes most sense. That's the first reason. The second reason why now is the right time is because the governor has made this a top priority. She has also introduced a landfill moratorium. We have been very encouraged by her leadership in this area. Myself and other members of my committee have worked very closely with DES and with a representative from the governor's office and agreed on the 3-year moratorium that you see in HB 171. So these are the two reasons why I think now is the time. Number one, we don't have a capacity issue right now. And number two, this is a top priority for the governor, and I think we are in a good position to get something done here together. There are two fundamental principles that I think we have to have in mind as we consider why a moratorium is appropriate. First, we should go as long as possible without needing a new landfill, a new municipal solid waste landfill. If we look at the diversion goals, our waste management plan, and the diversion goals that we find there, and we look out over the next 15, 20 years, by the time we get to the middle of this century, we are going to be about 50% off our diversion goals, right? I don't think anyone would say that that's an acceptable place to be, 50% off where we aspire to be. There are a number of initiatives which are just kind of picking up some steam right now, for example, around single-use plastics. We had a bill that came to House Environment and Agriculture. We've been talking to the Solid Waste Working Group to see what legislation might make sense around single-use plastics, which is a volume issue. It is also an issue for our landfills. The single-use plastic bags, for example, often get caught up in equipment and can cause a lot of damage, in addition to concerns that I know we all have around toxic chemicals, PFAS, for example, in single-use plastics. Also mattresses. There's a lot of interesting new technology. Chair Aaron, who will testify later on, has shared. I appreciate some new technologies that she's seen. For example, the Casella is doing down in Connecticut to recycle mattresses. I think we really need to look into that. Again, a huge volume issue, but also mattresses are just absolutely saturated with chemicals that none of us want leaking into our groundwater. So I think we are beginning to see some real technological advances in those areas, and I think legislation in the next year or two is going to help us deal with those issues and move toward our diversion goals. Finally, the problem of out-of-state waste persists. Almost 50% of what goes into our landfills is from out of state. Our statute requires that we make sure that we have enough capacity for New Hampshire residents. It does not require us to become the dumping ground of solid waste from around the region. And when we think about capacity and questions about how long our landfills are going to provide capacity, we need to be thinking about New Hampshire residents. And that means we need to take a serious look at anything that we can do to limit the amount of waste that is coming in from out of state. We've made some really good progress recently. Food waste, for example, we now have a food waste bill which is in effect this year, and hopefully we will see the effect of that in terms of limiting the amount of food waste that ends up in landfills. That's about 25% of what goes into landfills is food waste. And then also paint. We've seen some really good progress this year on legislation, extended producer responsibility legislation, which will help keep paint out of landfills. So I think those are good examples of things that we are currently doing, but we have to do more of those things if we are going to get closer to our diversion goals, which we're not even close to being able to get to. So that first goal was that we need to go as long as possible without opening a new landfill. Second, when we do site a new landfill, it should be the last one that we need for decades in this state, and we absolutely have to get the siting right. And we have new rules, but we continue to have a robust debate about whether or not those rules are appropriate. There's a bill I know you will be hearing later this morning, which also takes another look at what is an appropriate setback distance. The Site Evaluation Committee that is in HB2 that the governor has proposed and we have supported on the House side is a critically important step in the direction of making sure that when we do site another landfill, we're doing it in the right way. So I'll conclude my comments to you this morning introducing the bill by reiterating that our statutes require us to assure capacity for New Hampshire waste, they do not require us to be the dumping ground for the region. Now is the time to press pause when capacity is not an issue and address the deficiencies in our approach to diversion and the problem of out-of-state waste. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. I'm happy to take any questions the committee might have.
Well spoken. Representative, a question from Senator Waters.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. So just to clarify that this moratorium does not apply to expansion of existing landfills.
That is correct.
All right. And another question, if I may.
Follow up.
So is the language in 171 identical to the language that has been incorporated in House Bill 2?
Yes.
One more.
Follow up.
Would it perhaps make some sense procedurally to take the language in House Bill 2 relative to 171 and the site evaluation and have that as basically as a replacement of this bill so that we would have both those policies which really do dovetail together as is indicated by the way in which they're treated in House Bill 2 as a bill that could be passed and gotten directed to the governor independent of the budget?
I appreciate that question very much, Senator. Our committee worked very closely with DES and with the governor's office on the language that's in HB2, so we're very comfortable with it being in HB2, but you all know the Senate process is obviously far better than I do, and I defer to and respect your judgment on that issue. So whichever way you all think is most expedient, I would, as I said, I defer to that judgment.
Thank you.
All right, I have a question. Regarding capacity, where did you get your information that we're all set with capacity at this point?
From the most recent biennial solid waste report by DES, there is a section there that details where we stand currently and projecting out over the next several years in terms of capacity.
With regards to Turnkey, how much do they receive of out-of-state waste? Is it 70 or 80%?
I don't believe it's that high. There's a representative from Waste Management here, and I don't want to give you false information, so I would recommend that you ask him that question. I don't want to misrepresent it.
Would this bill prohibit over 50% of out-of-state waste?
This bill would have no impact on the question of out-of-state waste. That has to be dealt with in separate legislation. This would simply put a pause on permitting new landfills. It wouldn't apply to current landfills or applications for expansions. It would not apply to out-of-state waste. It would simply put a pause on the permitting process.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Aaron?
Good morning, and
Good
thank
morning.
you so much for hearing me. For the record, my name is Representative Judy Aaron, represent Sullivan County District 4, which is the towns of Ackworth, Goshen, Langdon, Leominster, and Washington. As Chair of Environment and Agriculture Committee in the House, I'm testifying in favor of this bill, HB 171, today. As amended, this bill places a moratorium or pause on the issuance of permits for new solid waste landfills for a 3-year period, in order to provide time for the state to develop new regulations, data, technologies, and policies that will protect New Hampshire and its local communities. During this pause, the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services may accept applications, evaluate them for completeness, and request more information, but will not issue permits. Recent data from the Department of Environmental Services documents that there is existing previously permitted capacity within landfills in New Hampshire that will meet the needs of New Hampshire during this pause and for at least an additional 5 years after. Anticipated expansion at existing permitted landfills is also likely to provide at least 10 to 20 years of future capacity. This bill does not prohibit the expansion or modification of any landfill facility that is currently permitted in accordance with RSA 149-M:9. There is no hurry to establish new landfill facilities in New Hampshire, and we must make sure to get our policies in order. Why 3 years? Well, I have to say that at the beginning of this legislative term, I was adamant that I did not want to see any moratorium on landfill permitting. I've since changed my mind. Why? Because I know we have passed through this legislature 3 years ago in 2022, for which rules we have passed bills through this legislature since 3 years ago, for which rules have not yet been completed. And I know that it takes time to get things written properly and approved by an agency's legal department, and that it also takes time to schedule things through GELCAR. I don't believe a year or two would be sufficient time with some of the detailed policy in the legislation that we are proposing, which affects DES's operations, and I would like to give our agency ample time to write the necessary rules and rule changes, especially as they have so many other tasks on their plate. We have the time to take a pause. Right now, we have several bills working their way through the legislature that would affect how solid waste is handled and landfilled, and how landfills are sited. We have the support from the governor for all of these bills and their policies. There is the leachate management bill, HB 566, the landfill siting bill, which you will be hearing shortly, HB 707, the establishment of a site evaluation committee that was placed in the budget trailer bill by the governor, and a few other hazardous waste bills that were also passed. All of these policies are vitally important and absolutely need to be put in place in order to make sure that New Hampshire's environment, and most importantly, our citizens' health, are all properly protected. The additional protections in these pieces of legislation will fill gaps that exist in current solid waste policy. These bills also have the support of members of the waste management industry and meet the goals of DES and our solid waste working group. We must ensure that our landfills won't leak and that they are sited properly and that we protect people and property, the health and the environment, which are in the vicinity of these facilities. Going forward, we want to make sure that our state is not sued for events similar to what happened in St. Gobain and other areas of the state. I truly hope that you will pass HB 171 and allow the much-needed time for policy changes to be made. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions, and I also have copies of my testimony.
Thank you, Representative. Questions from the committee? I have one. So with regarding to rules, I mean, DES just adopted a whole bunch. And you're saying there's still outstanding rules that need to be adopted?
The rules that were adopted in last year, because the rules had been they were going to expire, so they needed to be updated. So they updated the rules. And in some spots, they were made more robust, and other spots not. So the next bill that you're going to hear, HB 707, has some legislation in it that would make sure that those places where there were gaps in the current rules are strengthened in order to protect the health of our citizens as well as protect the environment.
But as of right now, the rules are up to date until this legislation passes, correct?
Correct. The rules have been updated.
No further questions, but we do like the mattress bill, right? We do like the fact that they're working on mattresses with.
We are, yes, as part of the solid waste working group, we are working on recycling mattresses. We do have a bill that has come to the Senate for paint recycling. We have other things in the work with the solid waste working group that we are looking to divert various items from our landfills, because that's part of what our charge is to make sure that we are not putting so much things into our landfills. And on top of that, I know, in terms of diversion, it's part of HB2 trailer bill. There was also some language placed in there from Representative Ebel to include a $3.50 per ton tipping fee, which would be refunded to our municipalities, but act as a discouragement from out-of-state waste to come to our.
Would that discourage out-of-staters to do the same to us? When we ship out of state, they can do the same to us then?
I suppose.
Yeah, so it's kind of like tariffs all over again.
Well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how that goes. But in any case, we are trying to figure out different ways where we can divert out-of-state trash. Seeing as half of that, apparently at least half of that, is being dumped into our landfills.
Right.
And so anything that we can do to discourage out-of-state waste to coming to New Hampshire, I think is a plus.
I would really like to know if that's an accurate number as far as the 70% of out-of-state waste going to turnkey.
I've heard between 50 and 70%.
It's interesting. All right,
Yep.
thank you. No further questions?
I know that we had a study committee a while back talking about, looking into incineration as well.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Representative.
Appreciate your time.
Representative Haskins? I let Judy go first because she has to go to another committee from what I was told.
Thank you. So do I.
Oh, nobody
I'm
told
on
me.
her committee.
Oh, there you go.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Linda Haskins. I represent Rockingham 11 Exeter on the Environment and Agriculture Committee. I just wanted to say, Senator Avard, that other states don't want our waste. We export very little of it, so I don't think it's a one-for-one with the tipping fee question. HB 171, which passed the House on consent, calls for a 3-year moratorium on any new landfill. Compelling testimony reveals that we will not need a new landfill for decades. The Department of Environmental Services, however, has a current application, recently temporarily denied by DES on several grounds, which is now being appealed by the applicant. No community, in my judgment, should go through what Dalton, Whitefield, and the North Country have experienced. A partnership of residents, property owners, friends, and lawmakers have combined forces to safeguard the environment, public health, and community well-being in opposition to a poorly sited, unnecessary landfill next to a state park and a pristine lake. We need this moratorium for several reasons: to reach our waste reduction goals, which have not been met year after year, to learn how to follow neighboring states and slow or stop the flow of out-of-state trash, and to figure out what to do with the billions of gallons of PFAS containing leachate that accompanies each new landfill. We hope that you will pass 171. Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Representative. Representative Gruber, or Gruber? I don't know if that's an R or an O.
That's a G-R-U-B-E-R. Thank you, Senators. I'm recently elected, so my name's not out very much yet. It's German.
Welcome to the fold.
Thank you very much. My name is James Gruber, for the record. I represent Cheshire County 16, and includes the town of Alstead, Gilsum, Harrisville, Keene Ward 2, Marlborough, Marlow, Nelson, Roxbury, Stoddard, and Sullivan. I can make sure I have them all. I'm also a member of the Agriculture and Agriculture and Environment Committee. I'm here to testify on, again, the critical importance of HB 171, which is establishing a moratorium for 3 years on only new landfills, not public facilities that are ongoing other facilities. This bill supports this 3-year landfill on siting of new landfills. I'm testifying as a civil engineer. I'm more nerdish than a lot of other people here. My background is I'm a licensed civil engineer in New Hampshire, and I've earned a PhD in environmental management. I've been involved in integrated solid waste management since 1976. Shows my age. My first project was to eliminate what we referred to back then as toxic soup coming out from a landfill in Massachusetts that was seeping into a swimming area, and people were getting sick. And that's my first exposure to solid waste and leachate issues. I served as the executive director for a regional solid waste district of 11 communities in Vermont. And in that role, I actually directed the process of siting and permitting a new landfill in Vermont, which was a long process. So I understand the issues involved here. I've also been involved in permitting household hazardous waste recycling facilities, building them, and worked with the EPA International Division in Bulgaria, helping Bulgaria create their first solid waste integrated management program for the country and democracy at the same time. And lastly, I was hired by the state of Vermont to review their statewide solid waste legislation, Act 78, to see how well it's meeting the needs of Vermont and make recommendations. So I've been involved in solid waste all my life, and I've come as the engineer to this group. I'd like to state that this is the right time for New Hampshire for a 3-year pause. The previous speaker spoke about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 3-year pause is what's needed. And this would allow the new legislation that we have coming out that has already been adopted by the House through unanimous consent calendar to be completed, and time for the regulatory process to go forward. We have critically new standards in the legislation you'll see shortly, and that includes opportunities to reduce the waste, ideally, which is around minimum 45% coming to the state, dumped here from our neighboring states. About perhaps 10% goes out, but mostly comes in. With what's coming in includes lots of materials, includes the PFAS in mattresses and other things that is not allowed to be dumped in their own state, so they dump it here, and which is something for me, as a 45, 50-year resident of New Hampshire, is not right. The most recent review of New Hampshire solid waste management situation is in what Representative was just presented here, this document that shows the waste coming in, and I can get you a copy of this if you would like. It shows that we have significant capacity in the state of New Hampshire that would go at least 5 years beyond the 3-year moratorium. And that's not including the potential expansion at the 6 landfills we have in the state now that could expand and provide 10 to 20 additional years of capacity for solid waste management in line landfills facilities. So this bill would give New Hampshire time to develop needed policies and tools to manage solid waste in an environmental, cost-effective, and efficient manner from my perspective. And it will also, I believe, reduce the dumping of waste from out of state. This pause does not impact the expansion of existing landfills. It does not impact municipal landfills that are operational landfills, and gives the time for developing the regulations that's needed to make the landfill safe, both for the groundwater supply, the surface water supplies, and the community as a whole. We have had a commitment verbally from the governor's office for a 3-year moratorium, and that's what we came up with here. And so I believe this is important for the state of New Hampshire, and that's the close of my testimony. I did give you a 1-page summary of my comments. So
Thank you for your testimony, Representative. Questions from the committee? I just have one. How long did it take you to site a new landfill in Vermont?
In Vermont, it took about 2 years, and the process started with a total transparent process where we hired an outside engineering firm. We agreed with numerous community meetings on what the standards for siting were throughout the 11 towns. Distance from schools, water supplies. We developed, this is back in the 90s again. And that process, everyone agreed with a comprehensive, it was a large list, about 15 to 20 factors that we had to assess. Some you could not exceed, or some would make less valuable. At that point, we had the engineers review the entire landmass of 11 communities in Vermont. Then we came up with about 15 or 20 sites that appeared to meet the standards. We had a very large meeting with lots of lawyers and lots of people, and went through each site, and people testified, well, you didn't identify this well here that serves the mobile home community and so forth, and we eliminated them. Eventually, we came with one site that appeared to meet all the standards people were happy with, which was in the town of Heartland. We actually built a bridge over the interstate highway so that we wouldn't impact the traffic within White River Junction, Hartford. So that's the process, and we did it without any litigation, any suing. Everyone was negotiated with the host community getting some fees. So that's the process. It takes a couple years, but it has to be very transparent, and it has lots of people coming with lots of lawyers.
Send lawyers and guns. It sounds like a song. No, all set.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. You recognize that song, right? All right. Let's see. Wayne Morrison. You're welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
For the record, my name is Wayne Morrison, and I'm here on behalf of an organization called North Country Alliance for Balanced Change. Speakers before me have said a lot of the points. I'll try and be succinct. I'm not going to read my testimony, but I have some bullets I'd like to talk about. Either in this meeting or in past sessions, we've talked about this need for a moratorium. And the terms that we've used, you've heard terms like pump the brakes, pause. I really think of this moratorium as hit the gas. We need to change direction, and we need to attack some sticky problems that have been difficult to do in the midst of all of the busyness and the many issues that both the legislature and DES has to deal with. But those problems are not going away, and in fact, they're getting, in many cases, they're getting more intense and more dangerous to the citizens and the tourists of our state, and to our economy in some regards, because we're driven by the beauty of our state attracts tourists in many different forms and across the months of the year, and drive a lot of what is the very strong economy that we have in New Hampshire right now. So I just want to say that the moratorium is not meant to be 3 years of let's just park this and not think about it anymore. It's really about I think it's the Hippocratic oath that doctors take that say, first do no harm. So part of the moratorium is we have concerns specifically about a number of key issues. You've heard about out-of-state waste. The more we know about leachate and PFAS has become something that none of us would have ever even recognized the term a few years ago. It is everywhere now, and there's growing concerns about it. So the moratorium gives us a chance to investigate and find policy solutions that address some of these problems that we're facing. You heard today there's overwhelming support for this moratorium bill from the House. Over the last several years, we've been at this for 6 years talking about problems in the solid waste. And I think it's absolutely encouraging to me to hear other speakers today echoing things that we've been feeling for quite a while as we've delved into this. So the House is enthusiastic. They've rolled up their sleeves. They've got engaged in this, and they see the merits of a moratorium. In addition to that, DES, to their credit, has been actively engaged and with everything else they've got going on. They did a technical review of the bill. They gave input. In fact, the bill was amended with some of their recommendations. The bill's also highly aligned with the governor in terms of both a moratorium and this. I'm happy to see the move towards establishment of a site evaluation committee. I think that's an essential thing going forward. We are at a critical juncture in our solid waste. You've heard about, we can argue about the capacity. Is it 2034? Is it 2036? I mean, we've actually had Waste Management stand up in hearings and say, we're absolutely going to expand in Rochester. It's the largest landfill by far. It has, you asked several times about how much out-of-state waste there. I believe the number is 60%-ish or in that range. It varies from time to time. It's certainly not 80%, but it's a big number. And because it's the largest landfill, it's a lot of out-of-state waste. So this is absolutely the perfect time for us to do what is hardest in life. Stop, step back, and reflect. When you are busy, like you all are, like DES is, it is very difficult not to just keep doing what you're doing and keep rowing. But strategy and policy require us to step back and think differently, to be innovative. And I think what this moratorium is a bridge to ask for more innovative approaches to difficult problems that not only we are facing in New Hampshire, but states all over across the country are facing these same problems. How do we deal with waste? How do we protect our water and our drinking water, our environment? And there's a balancing act. But if we don't act now, we risk making a mistake, rushing into issuing another permit with the best set of rules we have at the moment, which we think there are gaps in, even the ones that have just been implemented. We have the time and I think we have the obligation to future generations of people in New Hampshire to step back, do the investigations, find best practices, think differently about what we're doing. We have to live with these decisions for the next 100 years. And we have the time to fix them. Let's try and get it right. So, I would say achieving the state's solid waste plan, which I think was brilliant. This body, this legislature issued, you were the ones who gave DES what I think is an aggressive target of delivering this 25% reduction by 2030. But the beauty of that is it forces you to think differently about what are we going to do. 25% is 375,000 tons of trash that we're trying to take out of the waste stream. And if you put that in context, other than the waste management facility in Rochester, that's as big as any other landfill we've got. That would be like taking off the need for one landfill if we could achieve that goal. But we can't get there unless we do some things differently. We really have to move towards diversion. Take the food waste out. How do we scale? Karen Ebel and the working group has done great work to develop and get into law some composting work to take food waste out. It's almost a quarter of what's goes into landfills. Between that and trying to take some of the out-of-state waste, we can't zero it out. We can't fix it overnight. But the time to make change is now. And if we focus on the next new landfill, those two things would get us close to hitting that goal. It is doable. It's not an unattainable goal. So I'm thrilled at the dialogue that's happening today. I believe we have a chance to do something really great for New Hampshire by making informed, intellectually investigated change. We need to change course. So I urge you to think about this and get behind this bill. But the moratorium is the start of the work, not the end of the work. We really are asking the Senate to engage with the House to address these important issues that we're facing in solid waste. And DES cannot do it alone. It's not on their charter to fix out-of-state waste. That's a legislative issue, and we need your help. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions? Just want to, I had asked the previous speaker how long it took in Vermont. He said it was 2 years. In your opening testimony, you said we've been at this for 6 years. Now we're going to add another 3 years. That makes 9 years that we've been talking about this. And that doesn't guarantee a new siting.
Can I
Well, yeah, my question is pretty much, what is the reasonable amount of time? If you said it was rushing, but we're 9 years versus 2 years compared to Vermont. I hear what you're saying, and I understand it. And my solution was, I think we need to incinerate and turn it into energy. That's one of mine. I also think that we should recycle, which the mattress situation. That's another great thing that's going on. But when the time comes that we actually will need a new landfill, if we can't expand these old ones, what's a reasonable amount of time? Because there's always going to be this, well, not in my backyard syndrome. And that's what people are, where are we going to put our trash? We're going to send it out of state? We can't. We're only sending out about 10%. And it's just dialogue. It's not,
Yeah, no, I get it. First of all, it was going to be in my backyard. And I think NIMBY is the start of, you get people passionate about an issue, and you learn, and you educate yourself, and you learn about the rules. And what I have found is, it's in everybody's backyard. New Hampshire's a small state. If you mess up the water table, it doesn't just affect Dalton. It affects all the surrounding towns. And I didn't know anything about the leachate at the time we started this. I was worried about the trash trucks with all the stuff I could see. The leachate gets pumped, trucked, and sent back your way here in Concord. It ends up in the Merrimack River. It goes through our wastewater treatment facility. It's a statewide issue. It's not a NIMBY issue. Now, you mentioned the 6 years.
Yeah, 9.
Let's start with the GSL project. It started, and the first application was pulled. I don't think it was going to be approved, so they reset and started over. So it hasn't been 6 years. It's really, the new application is 3. But you can make an argument, let's say it's 10 years. We have decades before we're going to need another new landfill. And by the way, there's a big difference between a greenfield landfill and an expansion, to me, of an existing landfill. there is little question that we have plenty of capacity. We are not going to run into the situation where we're going to find ourselves needing capacity and not having it. It's just not going to happen.
So you're not opposed to expansions at all?
Not if they're in the right places. And it seems like, these other sites that we've looked at, the soil conditions are far superior. What we're worried about is when you site one of these things in sandy, gravelly soil, that there's a lot of engineering in this. They work very hard to make them so, double liners and monitoring wells and all that. At the end of the day, they leak, they spill. And we can't put them in soils where it's going to reach the water in rapid time. We just can't do that.
We appreciate your testimony. Thank you very much. Matt Leahy? We get just a couple more. Get Nancy, Sarah, I'm going to let him speak last. Okay.
Could you ask the Bay who will come up and answer this question?
Okay.
about Waste management.
All right.
He's not signed it, he'll come up to answer that.
Yeah. All right, you have the floor, Matt. I'm sorry.
Good morning, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Matt Leahy. I'm the policy director for the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests. I am passing out written testimony that I won't read. We do support the bill and really for the
Pardon me, that your mic's not on. Could you repeat?
Yeah, hi. Sorry
We'll
about
run
that.
this. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, so Matt Leahy, Public Policy Director for the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests. We support the bill and really for the reasons you've already heard, so I won't repeat them. I'll just make kind of one overarching point as to why we do support the bill. Really, the siting of a new landfill, does represent a substantial change in the nature of that property and also, could have impacts to abutters and other property owners. So we just think that this 3-year moratorium, does give the state more time to figure out more ways or keep moving in the direction we think they're going to try to reduce the amount of waste that is going into our landfills. And again, it's, really comes down to, what's the, what do we want New Hampshire to look like? So again, we support the bill, and but I'll be happy to take any questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Matt.
Good, thank
Good to
you.
see you up here. I don't see you up here too often, so. Nancy, you didn't want to speak, correct? Correct. All right, but you were in support of it? Yes. And Sarah, you wanted to speak. Sarah Doucette?
Yes, please.
Good morning.
I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're happy you're here.
Thank you. I usually watch from afar. This is much more
And you can press your little red button.
satisfying. Do I see a red button?
right in the front, the gray button. Gray button. No, just right in the front.
This one?
Nope.
See? I just don't comment on it.
Oh, it wasn't red.
This is why we pay her the big bucks.
I appreciate her. I wondered how she got to sit there. So I'm Sarah Doucette from Whitefield. I typically submit testimony as a private citizen, but today I want to tell you I'm a founding member of North Country Alliance for Balanced Change and CABC, where I've been speaking for a clean, safe environment and healthy community life since 2008. In 2019, we turned our attention to landfill siting and solid waste management. Since then, we've invested heavily to earn the credibility and respect necessary to come before you and advance the legislation that you see today. Our small grassroots group has spent tens of thousands of volunteer hours and hundreds of thousands of donated citizens' dollars to present you a strong case for best policies. Our advisors include the state's top wetlands, hydrogeological, and legal researchers and planners, and highly credentialed solid waste and traffic engineers as well. NCABC seeks to balance industry interests and political agendas to preserve the values of a clean environment and community well-being, values that must guide our decisions for New Hampshire to thrive. Our organization has always brought you impeccably accurate data and advice. about the complexities of waste management policy and regulation and best practices for the public good. Historically, to my knowledge, neither DES nor the waste industry representatives has provided any study or evidence to refute our testimony, although we have all heard undocumented speculation opposing reform legislation. Speaking now of House Bill 171, when we know there is no shortage of space for New Hampshire trash for decades to come, the 3-year moratorium on new landfill permits presents an important opportunity to study and strengthen the rules for handling waste in New Hampshire. A pause can help us reduce the costly use of half our valuable landfill space for out-of-state trash and diminish the toxicity it carries into our waters. It can bring time to learn more about the remediation and prevention of PFAS contamination from leachate in our air, water, soil, and in our bodies. It can make time for methane and carbon impacts to be minimized. And one hopes that this moratorium will finally lead us to act on New Hampshire's long-held dream of increasing the amount of trash filling our landfills by source reduction, recycling, reuse, composting, and waste-to-energy programs. In spite of close listening, I have not heard a single argument against this moratorium bill that is fact-based or otherwise convincing. What could be worth the myriad harms that we know will come to our state by permitting an unneeded and poorly regulated new landfill in the next 3 years? All evidence shows our capacity for the disposal of New Hampshire waste will continue unabated. All the evidence we have shows us that, if we declare a 3-year moratorium on new landfill permits in this legislative session. So wrapping up, please advance House Bill 171 in your committee and in the full Senate as well. And thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome, and thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Questions? Seeing none. Mr. Vayu? Does Waste Management, are they in support of this bill? I know you haven't signed up, but I see you in the audience, and you got an orange badge.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, my name is Henry Vayu, and I'm here on behalf of Waste Management. I would only say that sections 2 and 3 of the bill would exempt expansions and modifications. So obviously, it's intended not to prohibit the expansions. And the Turkey landfill, if everything stays the same, we have capacity till 2034, maybe 2035, the way it's being managed. But I say if everything stays the same. There's a lot of legislation flying around, and on the next bill, I will note there is a small concern that if something is not clarified, we may not be able to go beyond 2028. But the way this is written, it is not intended to restrict the expansions.
Hypothetical question.
Yes.
Supposing we're really successful with this housing crisis and we have a boom of housing being built, does that put an extra strain on our landfills?
One of the goals of the statute and the net benefit law is to make sure that we have capacity in the state of New Hampshire for our solid waste. And Turkey Landfill and Waste Management have met that bar because we are providing capacity. We can continue to provide capacity beyond 2034 if, again, things stay the same. And I did want to answer the question about out-of-state waste.
Yes, important one.
So I asked Steve Pudgy, who manages the Turnkey landfill, and these are reports you can check at the Department of Environmental Services. In 2024, it was 54% out-of-state waste, 46% in-state waste. So it was almost 50-50.
Okay.
And-
I heard it rumored around, so I just wanted some definite facts.
Oh, yeah, yep.
And Senator Rosenwald?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for taking my question. Just, could you clarify what you mean by if things stay the same?
Well, it's always brought up that we have capacity till 2034. We do. There is something in 707, which is the next bill, which I don't want to speak now, but if it's not changed, in 2028, we can't build another cell. We have the capacity to, but it will prevent us. So that's why, I mean, if not related to this bill at all.
I really appreciate you stepping up. Thank you. You weren't signed up, so, but I
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. John Tutho's in support, not wishing to speak. I'm going to let Eric Steinhauser? Yes.
Thank you, Senator Abbott. For the record, my name is Eric Steinhauser. I am a Senior Vice President with the firm Sanborn Head and Associates. I've provided written testimony that is co-authored by a colleague of mine, Timothy White, who's a professional geologist in New Hampshire. Just a little bit about my background. I'm a licensed professional engineer in New Hampshire as well as other states. I have national certifications in stormwater quality and erosion sediment control. My firm works, is a New Hampshire-based firm working on many projects throughout New Hampshire, including solid waste projects for private and public entities, including the state of New Hampshire. I'm happy to be a member of the New Hampshire Solid Waste Management Council, and I represent that council in the New Hampshire Solid Waste Working Group. My testimony today is mine. It does not represent anything from a client or a specific project or the Waste Management Council or the Solid Waste Working Group, to be clear on that. House Bill 171, and for the reasons that were stated, I think, well, I appreciate the sentiment and the reasons for it. I don't think a moratorium is actually what is needed. I will agree with proponents that there are other legislations that are more important with regard to waste diversion, perhaps waste bans, promoting recycling, and things like that. So I think we need more of a carrot legislation than the stick legislation that a moratorium would provide. Landfill permitting in the state, the new rules that are in effect as of December 21st of 2024 do limit expansion potential at existing landfills. One of my projects, the land mass that we're going to be able to develop has been reduced by 30%. That might increase at other sites as well. So the potential for expansions at existing landfills is already being reduced. The need for landfills in the state will not go away. We all produce waste every day, and we need to manage that properly. So again, having legislation for diversion and reduction of waste is where the focus of our work should be. But we still are going to need landfills. And the process for the concept through actually filling a cell could be as much as 10 years. I fear that a moratorium where applications would be reviewed, but rules might change, would require a lot more work on part of the applicants, their engineers and geologists, as well as DES, because the rules are always changing. And in that regard, why would you submit anything if you know the rules are going to change? So I'm in favor of a lot of the reasonings behind this, but not the moratorium itself. And I will take questions if you have any.
Questions from the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wouldn't a moratorium, though, give DES time to revise its rules?
Thank you for the question. DES revised the rules without a moratorium last year. It's a lengthy process. I think they did an excellent job of involving the public in informal informational meetings prior to issuing drafts. I know speaking with DES staff that they're looking at considering other changes, but a moratorium isn't necessary to make the changes. Rules are changed all the time at DES, whether to reflect new technology or procedures or federal rules. Moratoriums aren't needed to revise rules. If the basis is that the rules aren't safe now, and that's why we need a moratorium, I don't believe that's a true statement. I think the rules are safe. I don't think we have leaking landfills. An analogy I would make is that water bottle on your table is leaking. It has a permeability just like the liner systems, although the liner systems are many more times thicker and dense, and there's two of them, and there's detection systems behind it. Given enough time and pressure, your water bottle will leak. Landfills are limited to pressure and time, and they're not causing the groundwater issues that we see. They're from unlined landfills that we see in the state.
So currently DES is up to date on all their rules though, correct?
My understanding is of the end of December, they met their timelines to, there's, I think, you'd have to ask DES specifically, but there's like a 10-year life on the rules. Right. So either they have to adopt them as they are or revise them, and they did both depending on the section of the rules.
And every year they could change due to legislation coming?
They can do it every day. There's not a limit on that. It's just there's a process that takes their time and effort and probably takes it away from other things that they should be doing as well. But I think we have good rules in place as we sit today.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you for having me.
No further questions. I have one more speaker, Representative Potenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the record, Representative Kelly Potenza, Stratford District 19. Just wanted to say I'm in full support of this bill. There's a lot of different reasons why we need a pause. I hate the word moratorium. It sounds so permanent. And the pause is needed for there just to be a reset with so many different things that have taken place over the last 5 years. So if we just say where we are today, members of my committee met with DES and the governor's office, and she had a 1-year moratorium and then added in an extra 2 years. The moratorium bill that came from the Senate was 6 years. Our original bill in the House was 5 years. We came down to 3. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And it's not about changing rules or anything like that. We know that rules were in place for more than 10 years. I know that they get changed every 10 years, but that process is not something that just happens overnight. Legislation is not easily passed, as we know, because we've tried to have some changes that have been made to rules. So this is just a really good reset. There's been special committees and subcommittee meetings. There's been lots of communication. DES worked with Environment and Agriculture in the House and the governor's office and put this 3-year moratorium into the budget, which is in HB2, which now, of course, is on your side of the aisle, Senator. And it was done very mindful and thoughtful. We don't have a capacity problem. It's not going to stop, of course, any sort of expansions. There needs to be a reset. And that's why I'm here to say this is something that all the way at the top supports at this point. We have changed the time frame of years. I believe that DES supports this after the work that has been done with the chairman of our committee, as well as all the other stakeholders. And this is just a smart pause that needs to take place, because there is a lot of things that really should be worked on, and on all these different focuses that we should be looking at. Not just, of course, burying it in the ground, the solid waste hierarchy. There's a lot of different things. You are on an incredible committee, and were valuable in regards with talking about out-of-state waste and how we can curb some of that as well. So there's a lot of things that in a bipartisan manner that everybody is really on board with in protecting human health and the environment, and more so than anything else, our water bodies and our drinking water. So I support this fully. It's been, we went from 6 years to 5 years to 3, and working through with the governor and DES, and here we are with a really good compromise.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. I have nobody else wishing to speak on this, so we're going to close the hearing on that. We're going to open up the hearing to HB 707. Thank you. I already gave him the sheet back. Yeah, thanks. Whenever you're ready, Representative.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Once again, for the record, Representative Kelly Potenza, Stratford District 19. I introduced HB 707 to fix some problems that we have with the rules. And mind you, this was a very long process, approximately about a year that took place. And this is where, thousands of hours of work has been done across the board to get to the point that we are at. And this bill is really tackling about 7 to 8 different pieces of the 800 rules, which are 55 pages long. So I'm just going to say this bill takes care of multiple policy decisions to protect the health and safety of New Hampshire citizens, drinking water sources, our environment, including drinking water wells, perennial rivers, lakes, coastal waters from contamination. This legislation develops landfill siting criteria the way that all other states and provinces and countries do, via site-specific setbacks to surface and drinking water, based on how fast pollution can move through the local soils and bedrock. So HB basically 707 puts into statute a modern local data criterion for landfill siting. I have a handout that I gave you that basically is in regards with GELCAR. So GELCAR determined in November of 2024 that the DES rules were contrary to statute and against the public interest. I'm actually going to read their objection when it came out. The objection is based on the committee's determination that the rules are contrary to public interest, and because the rules are designed to benefit the administrative convenience of the agency to the detriment of the public, and because the rules are contrary to the legislative intent of RSA 149M1, the purpose statement of the statute. So here I am, when they came back, and you were, of course, at that meeting, Senator, they were just approved after they were rejected, based upon the fact that we, meaning the legislature, needs to set the policy. And so that is exactly what HB 707 does. So, like I said, they approved the rules in December, saying that the legislature needed to set law and policy rather than them. So HB 707 does all of that and adds words to the governing statute of the DES Solid Waste Division. Instead of being given authority merely to write rules, the division is being directed to write rules necessary to protect public health in the environment. HB 707 complements everything Governor Ayotte initially put in HB 2. Her newly created Site Evaluation Committee will be better able to assess the benefits and harms of a landfill project when the siting rules are brought out of the mid-20th century and into line with the rest of the world's. So how do we get here? HB, this is long before me. There's been people that have been fighting this years before me. I came into the legislature, elected in 22, started in 23. HB 1454, which did establish site-specific setback rules, bodies of water and all of that, was passed in 2022. So in March, the House did that on a voice vote. In May, the Senate passed that 16-8. It was vetoed by Governor Sununu. The House overrode the veto. The Senate was not able to, because of course we need a 2/3 vote. Both chambers wanted time of travel. That is the most important part of this bill, is the 5-year time of travel. So some people have pretty much discussed this exhaustively for 3 years, but if you talk about the legislature, that's all that's been talked about in regards with this. So everyone says that it needs to be site-specific, and then the new rules come out and they're arbitrary. All that's in there right now is a 500-foot setback. So in all actuality, you can put a landfill anywhere in the state of New Hampshire right now, as long as you bring in some soil. It doesn't matter what that site is, as long as you're 500 feet back. This is where my bill fixes this. So to give kind of a little bit of a, I gave you guys some big, huge, and I didn't put them in color, unfortunately. So I'm going to get them for you again. That talks about the rules and what's less protective and more protective. We can get into that in a second. But the other criteria that's here talks about where the rules started and where they are now. So this was based upon March 8th of 24. So when the DES started this process, the saturated hydraulic conductivity was 1 × 10⁻⁴. My bill brings it back to 1 × 10⁻⁴. So upwards of 20 years in this state, we had 1 × 10⁻⁴, okay? And then when the rules came out, we were very excited. That was in DES's initial draft. They went to 1 × 10⁻⁵, which was more protective. It would be actually 0.03 feet per day or 11 feet per year, where basically pollution would travel. So the interesting thing is, when my bill first came out, I had 1 × 10⁻⁵. Talking with all the stakeholders and everything else, I decided to switch it to 1 × 10⁻⁴, so we could get this passed. Our body in the House, and of course the body in the Senate, so we could really move this ball forward. Then the rules started to get weaker. They came out strong. That was 10/16 and 10/16 of 23, bottom line right here. Then they went from 10⁻⁴, then they went 1 × 10⁻⁴, 1 × 10⁻�3, and then this was the worst one, 5 × 10⁻�3. And then they went back to 1 × 10⁻�3 with adding in soil, which means you could pretty much put a landfill anywhere in the state. And that is where our current rules stand right now. The other piece that I increased was the 500-foot setback. I brought it to 1,500. DES gave us a good map of that as well. There is a map here, which I think I included for you guys, that talks about this too. And I think the most important thing to talk about when it comes to the map and timing and stuff like that really means, here's the math. We basically need 500 acres. We need maybe one new landfill for the next 100 years. We don't have a capacity problem. I can prove that we don't have a capacity problem. There's multitudes of other people that can prove we don't have a capacity problem right now. So New Hampshire basically has 6 million acres. We need maybe at that, and there's some other people that will talk about this that are better hydrogeologists and that I think are up behind me that will talk about this as well. But 500 would be the max. So 500 acres is 0.008% of 6 million. So it doesn't matter whether we're writing decent rules that would eliminate 30%, 50%, or even 90% of the state from consideration, because we'd have to eliminate 99.9%, and no one at all thinks this is anywhere near reality. My 1,500-foot setback basically opened up when I first came out. The bill was too protective. I had a 3,000-foot setback. I changed that to 1,500. And the reason why they're both in there is because surface runoff, the furthest that you could be away from a body of water, or of course a group of drinking water wells or anything like that, needs to be further. There is a 1,000-foot setback already in the rules that has to do with, I believe, schools and things like that. But I have 1,500. That's what I would like that changed as a full. Just because if there is a surface spill, the further away it is from hitting a lake or a body of water, that's extremely important. The other, there's basically, I want to talk about a couple other pieces that are in here. This, I gave you guys a response document. This is really important. This came out in October of 2024. This was based upon all of the public comment. So where DES actually responded saying that the proposed setbacks are site-specific. They aren't. The actual language of 80403 is put in there for you guys to have. It says a landfill and associated stormwater, leachate and decomposition gas infrastructure shall be located that such a discharge, spill, leachate release, or other failure of the waste containment system or associated infrastructure will be detected and assessed and remediation initiated prior to contamination reaching any perennial water body. That doesn't give anyone any instruction, and to be honest, it puts the state in a very precarious position, I believe, for lawsuits and everything like that, because it doesn't have anything literally specific. So, of course, in my bill, besides, with siting, it has, you have to have a hydrogeologist. But, number 2 on my bill, the 5-year distance of travel estimate shall be calculated by multiplying the velocity in units of feet per year by 5. That's the science. This is the science behind this. And I'm not a scientist, but I have studied this stuff. I could talk about it in my sleep. And, there are, there's the leading solid waste company that we have in New Hampshire, has no problem with a 5-year time of travel distance. They have some other issues that might be in it. But my bill basically does 8 things. 5-year time of travel. The applicant must investigate the water table if there's nearby wells being used. The third is having a guard on site, 24/7, 365. And I think that's important for a lot of reasons, not just for if there's a spill or anything like that. I really, just with the level of security and fires that have happened at landfills and all of that kind of stuff, there's a huge amount. Rochester is the largest landfill. That's where I am. And I'm very grateful for the work that, and the conversations that I've had with Waste Management. They're a fantastic company. They listen, they're responsive, all of those things. I think they have a problem with that 24/7, 365 on there. That could be negotiated, but I still think, a company that is a billion-dollar company shouldn't have a problem with having someone on site. Eyes and ears on site is better than a call dialer or anything else. Number 4, the 1 × 10⁻⁴. That's the conductivity for the first 20 feet. Number 5, the most important thing, no imported soil. This is an issue that we can talk about too. The 100-year storm with a 50% margin. We could maybe move out of that 50% margin. As you know, and a lot of people have talked about for the last 3 years, the amount of rain, the amount of flooding that we have had in New Hampshire is crazy. We've hit a 50-year storm multiple times in the last decade. So that's why that really needs to be increased to the 100-year. Basically, I changed one word in how DES denies a permit from a may to a shall, from a shall to a may. This is basically for bad actors, somebody that has bad history, breaking the law, a lot of different things. And then, of course, this statute, which I read off the bat, which was 149M, and it basically changed 10 words to direct DES to include in their rulemaking to consider the environment. I could go on and talk about this for a long time, and I won't anymore. I know that this bill is in line with everything people have been, not just legislators, but it's a bipartisan effort that's been huge, that have been kind of yelling off the rooftops about this for many years. And this is the best time now. We have, the governor is fully behind this. We have so much more common sense back in the room about these things. And I'm really excited that we can move this forward. And if this committee feels as if there needs to be a couple changes to this bill to get this through, I would love to have a seat at the table with that. All due respect, I want to do everything possible to protect the human health and the environment, as well as being smart with the industry. You can talk to Waste Management alone. I'm not anti landfill or any of that. I'm all of the above type of approach. And Senator Avard, you've talked a lot about certain things like incineration and all of that. It's expensive. But you know what? If the state wants to do something like that, the amount of technology that I have studied on that in recycling centers and all that, we should do it. It would be phenomenal. But landfill should be the last resort, and we only really need one in the next 100 years. And let's do it in a perfect place that's got good soil, clay, and we can make it happen. I have a map that I didn't bring that I'm going to show you that was done by experts on both sides of the aisle that show where the next landfill could be. And, if that's a public-private partnership or whatever it may be, so it's only taking care of New Hampshire trash, however we can make this happen, we can. But I appreciate the time, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking my question. So I'm looking at this letter from the Commissioner of DES, to the Commissioner of
Correct.
DES, objecting to the final rules, Jelkar's objection, and basically saying it's contrary to the public health purpose of 149M1. And I noticed that statute's been on the books since 1996, so it's not a new thing.
Correct.
That public health is of paramount importance. Would you agree?
Yes, strongly.
Thank you. Could I follow up? So those of us who been in the legislature for a while have sometimes run into the problem where you pass policy and then a department writes rules that the legislature doesn't think are consistent with the public policy. But when we do that, we delegate, we abrogate our constitutional authority for policymaking to the executive branch. So would you agree that the only way in those cases to have rules that conform to the legislature's authority to set public policy is to change statute and direct new rules?
Yes, and I just want to say that there's 3 bills that really came out of this whole process for a year. I was on the subcommittee, so I heard from DES on a regular basis and from other stakeholders that presented to our committee, which was great on this whole rulemaking process. But we have a public benefit that has been incorporated into HB2, which is very important, and that was done in collaboration with DES as well. The moratorium, so we can have this pause to really get it done right. And because this conversation's been going on for a long time. It's kind of like Groundhog Day. If you've ever seen that movie, I feel like I'm about to smash that clock into bits. So, and so there we are at with the moratorium piece. I like to call it the pause. And then it finishes it off with some things that are inherently flawed with our current rules. Right now, we have the weakest rules in the world. I mean, we are weaker than even in, for example, in India. I mean, places that you would never expect, Mississippi, that you would never expect that would be, you know, the beacon of necessarily the environment. So it has to be fixed. And that's what we were directed to do. JLCAR directed us to do that. And it is in the legislature, and I love that you just said it. Everything that what you just said is exactly what is the reason why we're here and what we're doing.
Well,
So, am I to understand that the current rules that were recently adopted would allow 3 feet of leachate to travel through soil per day? That's 10 to the -4, which is giving me like...
Actually, we are at, so we're at 10 to the negative, the current rules are 10 to the -3, and I will give you that exact number.
Appendix A says that is 3 feet of travel per day.
Correct.
Thank you.
3 feet per day. That's this. This is that document that I gave you as well. It's really important, and it shows New Hampshire and what our rules currently are. And then Illinois, Texas, Arkansas, all of these, they're 10 to the -7, 10 to the -6. Yeah, so this is where we're at.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
no further questions? Thank you very much. Mr. Wimsatt, would you mind coming up to the desk? Just got a couple of questions. Could you explain a little bit more about the 3 feet per day?
Well, I'm not prepared to engage in a mathematical discussion, but I think that it's important to understand that the hydraulic conductivity of soils is absolutely relates to how fast water can move through the soil, but it also depends largely on the gradient and a number of other factors. So to say that 10 to the -3 in any circumstance means that 3 feet, that a contaminant can move 3 feet per day in soil is not an accurate statement. You don't have enough information to say that.
So another question I have is, there was a statement saying that we have the weakest rules compared to India and possibly Mississippi. Would you agree with that?
I don't believe that for a moment. And in fact, when we went through the rulemaking in December, the process with the Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, we provided a detailed response to the original preliminary objection, and we also provided.
Which was in November. Right.
The objection was in November, that's correct, and we went back to the Joint Legislative Committee in December, and we provided about a week ahead of time, or a couple weeks ahead of time, a written response to that preliminary objection, which we were prepared to speak to at that hearing in December. And that included not only our letter, but some supporting documentation, as well as a memo or a letter to the committee that explained almost 30 areas where we had strengthened the rules prior, compared to the previous rules. And actually, I have copies of that today, just for reference. I'll leave with the committee so that you know what our response was at that time.
And there were no recommendations of changes, if I recall.
The committee elected to find that we had completed our rulemaking assignment consistent with the law, and they approved the rules.
There was a statement saying that we could build a landfill anywhere in the state. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct. Again, it's what we tried to discuss with folks who've had concerns about these rules is that you have to look at the rules in their entirety. And one of the key things that folks tend to leave out, and that's actually detailed in the response we made to the Joint Legislative Committee, is that there are additional provisions beyond just a specific 500-foot setback to surface water and such. And one of the key provisions is it said you cannot site a landfill, and we won't permit a landfill unless you site it such that a release from the facility can be detected, investigated, and remediated prior to groundwater contamination above standards reaching the property line of the facility, and also prior to contaminants migrating to a surface water. You have to be able to detect, investigate, and remediate that prior. So that is it's not something you can just look at and say that's X feet. You have to look at the site-specific circumstances at a given proposed facility, but that's why we have hydrogeologists and engineers on staff to evaluate a proposal like that, and we require licensed professionals, engineers and hydrologists, to prepare the application materials that make that argument. So there's professional staff review, both from the standpoint of the applicant as well as by the agency when it reviews the application, to make sure that those criteria are met. Those are very stringent criteria, and they're likely to preclude a number of sightings from occurring. But we believe that they should be there, and that's why they were written that way, and that they are protective.
Originally, there was a 200-foot setback, and there was a complaint that was very arbitrary,
right?
If I recall correctly. And so it was bumped up to approximately 500 feet, correct?
That's correct. There's a specific setback requirement that any landfill footprint be at least 500 feet from a surface water. So that's you can look at the map and figure that out. You don't need to know anything else about the facility. But that is just one criteria that we apply. So if you don't make that, you don't get siting. But if you meet that, then we go to that much more detailed analysis of how contaminants would move through the formation, how fast they would do that, and whether they would meet the standard of being able to be detected and remediated prior to reaching the property line in groundwater or prior to reaching a surface water.
So there's a 1,500 foot setback based upon this bill, from what I understand.
Right.
I'm not sure, is that based on science or is that based on arbitrary, like the 200?
I did not prepare that, so I don't know what it's based on.
Okay.
The agency did not, that's proposed in the bill, but the agency did not propose that.
On page 3, on line 18, it turns the may to a shall deny a permit. The department shall deny a permit under this section. Are you familiar? Did you look at this at all?
I'm familiar with it. We are not taking a position on this bill, but I'm familiar with that provision.
Does that change the dynamics substantially?
I think what it means is that, as I understand it, if an applicant or one of its officers had been convicted of a felony or pled guilty to a felony in the previous 5 years, the agency would need to deny the permit, as opposed to having some discretion to determine whether that was necessary or not.
Could smoking pot be considered a felony? Just teasing. Oh, that's not, I shouldn't have gone there. But anyway, a felony, but you may or you may not, it doesn't have anything to do with the value of the application at all. It just has to do with their record as an individual, correct?
I just testified on a bill about this, the requirement to do background checks over in the House A&A Committee this morning. And in fact, we've had, for 4 decades, we've had provision in the law that says that applicants for either solid waste or hazardous waste facility permits must subject themselves to a criminal background check. And the purpose for that is to ensure that folks who are involved in or, head up companies that manage these facilities do not have criminal records.
So one final question from me, and I don't know if you folks have any questions, but in the previous hearing, the one, and I'm going to have him come up, Mr. Vey mentioned that if this goes through with the language as is, it could change the lifespan from 2035 to 2028. Where in this bill would that make that change? Or I could ask Mr. Vey.
I think it would be best to ask him. I'm
Yeah.
not sure how that is.
Questions from the committee? Yes.
God, I hate to weigh in.
No,
here.
we appreciate you a lot.
Am I correct that different kinds of soils would allow stuff to flow through them at different rates?
Absolutely.
And so is it unreasonable then? I'm sorry, follow up.
No, you're right.
Is it unreasonable to consider the time of travel, because that then says the department has to consider the type of soil?
No, I don't think it's unreasonable to consider the time of travel, and the provisions of the rules that I just described in response to Senator Vart's question does that. It does it a different way than is proposed in 707, but it does that.
Thank you.
I do have one other question. The mattresses came up into a previous hearing, and I thought it was illegal for mattresses to cross the borders. Is that correct? I mean, we're not supposed to receive mattresses from out of state, from what I understand.
Not specifically or not absolutely. We do have a law that says that if a particular waste is prohibited from landfill disposal in another state, that it's not to be sent here for disposal. So it would depend on which state it came from.
Henry, don't go anywhere. I need you. All right. I'm going to have you next. Yeah, I know. Oh, don't you go anywhere. All right. He just did. It's too bad. No further questions? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. I was going to have Henry next, but let's see. We have a lot of speakers, so Wayne, can you keep it under 3 minutes? I will in a minute. Wayne? Yeah. I just got a lot of speakers, so I'm just trying to, thank you. I want them last. I don't want them, because everybody's supportive, so I want them at the last page and hear all the objections. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. I just want to say that it's Wayne Morrison with NCABC. I just want to point that we support the bill. We recognize that there was an extensive rules review, and the rules have been updated. You've asked several questions about that, Senator Avard. I would just say that we agree to disagree with DES, not on the fact that the rules have been updated, they have, but as somebody who participated in that process, we gave feedback throughout the process, and the end result wasn't what we thought should be done. And so there's a disagreement from a policy position of what those rules are today. And therefore, this bill, I believe and have believed since several years ago when this committee, or at least the Senate and the House, agreed on 1454, it eventually got It eventually got vetoed, but it was a site-specific time of travel, bill. And to me, there's a lot of complexity around this and the math and what's 10 to the minus 3 mean and how many feet per day. And we recognize all of that. But at some level, if you step back, we believe it's common sense to say the geology of our state varies greatly from site to site. And rather than a 500-foot, and the Director Wimsatt has said there are the holistic part of the rules, and this statement about you will not, the applicant agrees not to pollute the water is a motherhood statement, but it lacks, we think it lacks the beat behind it, which we think the solution to that is the site-specific setback. But we agree with the bill. We support the bill, and we think this is part of a holistic change that will make us safer. So,
thank you for your testimony. Questions? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Rosenwald does have a question.
I do. On page 2, line 7, well, 6 and 7, there's a choice between 1,500 feet and a 5-year distance of travel estimate. So there's not a hard and fast 1,500 feet setback requirement, correct?
that's my understanding, yes. That it's kind of like you would do the mathematics of you test the soils and you come up with the variation would be, it would either be 3 miles or 200 feet, depending on how, if it was clay or whether it was sand and gravel. This was an offset to say no matter what that ruling, what that math said, there'd be some minimum. And it was 500 feet, and this bill makes it 1,500 feet.
Thank you. Henry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, for the record, my name is Henry Vayu, and I'll be here on behalf of Waste Management. So I'm going to speak to how this bill 707 would impact waste management in the Turkey landfill. So when you go to section 3 of the bill and the time travel, that is sections 16 and 17, the 5-year time travel. In that section, it says that it doesn't apply to expansions of existing landfills. So Turkey would not be subject to the 5-year time travel. That is in C and D of that section. But the other sections, yes, because those other sections, 17, 18, 19, 18, 19, 20, 21, don't have that same language the way we read it, and I checked with the department to see if they read it that same way, the exception would not apply in those instances. So looking at section 20, which is line 28
on
page 2, and the requirement to have 20 feet of undisturbed soil between the bottom of your liner and any bedrock would be problematic. The current landfill is permitted for 6 feet. If we were, in some areas, again, it's variable. So in some areas, it's 20 feet or more, but in other areas, it's only 6 feet from the bedrock. If it has to be 20 everywhere, it would be problematic. Now, if this was amended to say that we could bring material in to make it compliant with the 20, then it would be okay. But this is the problem that I pointed to of the language, that if it's not fixed, come 2028, because we're permitted for the site, but every time we want to do a new cell, we have to get approval for construction and operation. We can't operate that thing until we get a permit to operate. And if this would apply in that instance, that's where the problem arises in 2028. So this 20 is a problem. Section 22 with the storm events, and it says it's got to have a 50% margin of safety. So if it's a 100-year storm with a 50% margin of safety, that's a 500-year storm. And currently, I don't think there's anywhere in the state where you'd be able to get the place where you would build the culverts, the stormwater basins, all that stuff to achieve that. So right now, under current law and what the department operates under, NHDS is now requiring facilities designed for rainfall amounts from the extreme participation model for New York and New England, developed by the Northeast Regional Climate Center, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and Cornell University. This database provides a more accurate region-based model based upon historic rainfall than the previously used National Weather Service model, last updated in the 60s. So we would argue the current measurement that the department requires is more accurately reflected of the region. And so those two sections are problematic. Now, I just spoke with Representative Potenza. It is not her intention to negatively impact Turkey in this way. I think people want the capacity, but left unchanged, it's problematic.
Questions from the committee? Senator Rosenbaum.
Thank you. Just two, if I could. So, just so I'm clear, does Waste Management have any problem with, or does it support the 5-year distance of travel provision?
It wouldn't apply to us.
Okay, so.
Because you're an existing landfill.
Because we're an existing landfill.
And, okay, my second question is this, I think it's section Roman 19, which is that you have to have an employee on site 24 hours a day. Is that an issue, or are there
Are we
remote-
not going to expand the landfill if that's a requirement? No, but I will say that the technology that we have will alert to problems quicker than someone at the facility. But if that's something that people feel is needed, we're not going to not expand because of that.
Okay, thank you.
No further questions. Thank you very much, Sonny. I appreciate you being there.
Okay.
Representative Linda Haskins.
Thank you very much. For the record, Linda Haskins, Rockingham 11, Exeter. I never imagined when I joined the Environment and Agriculture Committee that we would spend as much time on landfills as we have. I just want to hearken back to your comment, Senator Avard, about 6 years into this 3-year moratorium. My answer to that is the bill we're now considering about the siting of a landfill caused us to have to investigate what the applicant, since DES had a current application, what they knew about siting the landfill, where they wanted to site it. And since expert testimony, some of which you'll hear behind me, suggested that the applicant's site was not appropriate, That's what has taken us so long to dig into it so the rest of us could understand how we got here. So I will go back to my statement. I am a co-sponsor of this bill, which I believe is a critical component of the strategic plan that the current governor has called for to modernize our solid waste system. For the past 6 years, the House has done the heavy lifting when it comes to improving solid waste rules. I would interject here also, no one on E&A wants to be adversarial to the Department of Environmental Services. We have worked really hard to work together. I personally, and I think others on the committee as well, do not believe that the rewrite of the rules is protective enough. We tried to say so when we went to JELCAR. Unfortunately, the vote was called and we could not even speak, which was unfortunate. Okay, so these rules, we believe, are unnecessarily weak. The difference between the November and December rules did not seem to be significant enough to some of us, so that having denied them for the reasons they cited and then approving them, I thought was unfortunate. And as has been mentioned, JELCAR specifically said to us, we are not a policy-making body. You have to do that. This is what this bill is trying to do. It is our best effort at trying to fix what is wrong with the current rules. An appropriate site-specific setback for any landfill is necessary to ensure that toxic materials are not leaching into the groundwater. We know this. We all know this. This bill puts into statute protective language that highlights a 5-year travel time that Senator Rosenwald highlighted for toxic materials to reach groundwater or lakes or rivers, allowing for time for interdiction as necessary. We heard expert testimony that all landfills leak. The question is, how are we going to know they're leaking? When are we going to know? And that's what the on-site 24-hour, 7 days a week human being is meant to go alongside with the technology. Technology can fail. Human beings can fail. Having both would be more protective than having one or the other. Let's see. So the 500 feet could give a community decades of protection or only months of protection before irreversible damage ensues if the developer were foolish enough to propose siting a landfill in a sand and gravel pit. It is past time to enshrine these measures to protect what makes ours the welcoming state that residents and tourists all enjoy about New Hampshire. Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you. Representative James Gruber.
Thank you, Senators. My name is James Gruber. I represent Cheshire County 16, and I'll read the 10 communities. And I just want to reiterate that I'm a licensed civil engineer with decades of experience in solid waste management and policy. I'm here to testify on behalf of this bill, HB 707, that is entitled Requiring the Environmental Services to Establish a Site-Specific Setback Distance for Proposed New Landfills. And I understand there's some issues that apply to extending existing landfills, and I think that needs to be worked out, but that was the intent. And the bill is the focus on public health and protecting these landfills that's consistent with other states or current standards in the United States. So the focus primarily is setback issues and protecting groundwater, drinking water supplies, perennial rivers, lakes, and coastal waters. And as we all know, leachate contains a lot of things that we don't even know about yet. PFAS is one of them, very carcinogenic, as well as other potential contaminants. And The standards in this proposed bill is consistent with our neighboring states, most of the states in the United States and many other countries. I won't go through the list. I don't think it's exceeding the standards, but it gets back up to the standards that are now common. As you know, standards change as we get more information about what's toxic, what happens, and hopefully we don't have any more of those incidents here. The key part of this bill is the number, and I'm an engineer, is 1 times 10 to the minus 4th centimeters per second or less. And that key number is, I looked at the numbers at the neighboring states. That's a common number. Some people have more extreme, but that seems to be the commonality. And that measures, the key factor is how long it takes for a contaminant spill. And we know that landfills do leak. And how long it takes to get to the surface boundary. And here it's 5 years. So clearly, as Mr. Winsett indicated, you need a hydrogeologist to do the analysis. Our job here is to set the standard and let the hydrogeologists look at the soil conditions specifically. But the type of soil, 10 to the minus 4th centimeters per second, is what's used in things like pond management to keep the water from going out, things like that is common. It's very, very fine silts and some clay stuff material. The last thing is, besides the 5 years to get to the surface, there was a basic minimum, which is 1,500 feet, so it's either or. And I think that's primarily due to the intense storms we sometimes have here. I'm not saying why we haven't, but we have much more intense storms, the data shows. And so surface water runoff, it needs to be contained. That could have contaminants. Finally, it talks about a 100-year storm and a 50% margin. I'm not certain how that's computed on, if that's equivalent to a 100-year storm or not, but it's a 100-year storm plus a margin of safety. And the last note is that it's focusing on new landfills. I did speak with some others here before we started, and there's some concerns about how it might impact expansion of existing facilities. I think that needs to be addressed because those existing facilities that we have now that are being managed well can provide us many more years of safe solid waste disposal. So in conclusion, I think it's very important and significant for public health and the environment and to be consistent with other standards of other states. That's because waste is kind of like water flows downhill. If we have the cheapest, we'll get their waste. And so I think if we have similar standards, then the costs are similar and we won't have quite so much waste being dumped on the state of New Hampshire. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Representative.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I didn't know if I'd be able to get back from ENA, and so I had scratched my name off, and I was wondering if I might be able to testify.
Can you keep it in 3 minutes?
ENA?
Yeah, keep it in 3 minutes if you can.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I saw Senator Pearl over in ENA, and so we're ping-ponging back and forth.
Chasing each other around.
Exactly. Again, for the record, Representative Nick Germana, Cheshire 15, and thank you for taking my testimony. I wanted to clarify one point that was made earlier about where New Hampshire's kind of standards compared to, say, India or Mississippi. That specific reference has to do with the hydroconductivity rate. There are obviously other factors involved, but if we're looking at 1 times 10 to the negative 4th, India is 1 times 10 to the negative 7th, and I believe that Alabama is as well. So when we talk about how New Hampshire compares, that was the number that was being used for comparison. I think that the principle that I think is most important for us to keep in mind is very simple. Distance is a function of time. How far we set a landfill back from a protected body of water is a function of how long it would take to get from that site to the body of water. So, the argument that I've been making in ENA, in this committee, and with the department is that we need to put that measurement first. We need to talk about that 5-year distance because, as I said, distance is a function of time. I won't go back over some of the history that some of you know better than I do about some of the specifics in 1454 and the fate of that bill that clearly reflected the will of the legislature at that time. I served on the oversight subcommittee for the rules that DES came up with. And so I'm very familiar with the rules. I want to say that I respect immensely the work of DES, but I respectfully and strongly disagree that we cannot use site-specific setback standards that are used by other states. And that was a concern that was raised by JLCAR. They issued the preliminary objection last November. No changes were made. When they passed the rules, they said explicitly that they believed that these standards were not as good as they could be, as good as they should be, but that committee is not a policy committee, and they did specifically say, they did at that November meeting, and the letter that they sent to the commissioner both make that statement explicit. In 2011, there was a map prepared by a DES geologist named Brendan Kernan, which indicates that only about 14% of the land in New Hampshire might be excluded by the standards that were in 1454, which includes that 5-year setback. So we're not talking about even a quarter of the state, let alone a half or more of the state. That work done by DES indicated 14% might be excluded if we used a 5-year standard. So that is not by any means onerous for the state. Just this last January, and I'll close with this, the director of the Casella facility in Coventry, Vermont, made a really important statement that I hope you will keep in mind. He said that that site in Coventry is an ideal site because of the clay which underlies that site. And he said, quote, "You know, you can't put this stuff on really soft clay. You don't want to put this stuff on sand." End of quote, right? So that's a standard we need to be thinking about. And importing soil over sand is not a substitute for actually having a site which is adequate for the purpose. So as I said, the one principle I hope that we can get to at some point is, again, to remember that distance is a function of time, and our rules and statute should reflect that.
Well spoken. Questions from the committee? Thank you,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Appreciate it. Sarah Doucette?
Hello again, Sarah Doucette from Whitefield, and I'll be brief. Though I do want to mention, I was looking at the plaque for the Medal of Honor outside the room, and the first explanation of the graphic is that there are 4 pale green lines that symbolize the importance of New Hampshire's waters. And it goes on to talk about the environment and why people have fought and died for these environmental values. So I recommend that to you if you haven't looked at it. So I was recently asked in leaving a message for one of your aides if I was a constituent. An understandable question, and I answered that I am a constituent of the whole Senate. We're a small state, and your decisions, regardless of district, are tremendously impactful on me and everyone who calls New Hampshire home. I hope you will hear me as your earnest and engaged constituent, somebody worthy of impacting your decisions as well as simply being heard, because that's a very distinct difference. We've been heard a lot, but we don't generally feel that we've had an impactful role in decisions with this sort of legislation. And I hope you'll agree with me that it's go time to say yes to 707 as it's amended. The first bill to create better landfill siting regulations to protect our waters came in 2019, and since then the legislation's been refined to meet many of the requests made by senators and representatives during hearings on a succession of really thoughtful bills. I think we agree that the bill before us is the culmination of tremendous work by many people to safeguard New Hampshire waters' public health in the face of broadly documented landfill hazards. A clean environment is something we and our loved ones and everyone else needs in order to thrive. That's the message we're getting from Governor Ayotte, from the House of Representatives, from our Department of Environmental Services team, and the people of New Hampshire, north, south, east, and west. And it's time to be clear about the misleading narratives that this committee has heard in the past. They've been rebutted by people who know economics, waste industry, operations, and the law. I just want to quickly review the upside. If landfill regulations are strengthened, there will not be a cosmic upset in waste disposal costs in New Hampshire, said the economist in his testimony. There will still be waste industry operations expanding their services in New Hampshire, said the industry spokespeople themselves. We will not sacrifice more than a handful of jobs for our waste management workers, looking at the data. Putting a limit on out-of-state trash is not a problem, said the Department of Justice. And finally, as you've heard, the Jalkar decision about the new solid waste 800 rules was not a strong endorsement of them. Those committee members declared it is the role of the legislature to improve the existing rules, according to the record in December last year. So that's what House Bill 707 can do. It will improve the existing rules, and it's time to say yes to this legislation. That's what your constituents want. You have the privilege to say yes to a cascade of generational benefits, to vote yes in good conscience with the endorsement and gratitude of thousands of New Hampshire residents who want a clean environment and safe, smart landfill regulation. The wind is at our backs after years of earnest preparation. It is go time. So thank you again for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Muriel?
Thank you very much for hearing me. My name is Muriel Robinette. I'm a practicing hydrogeologist in the state of New Hampshire for the last 40 years. I'm here on behalf of NCABC. And I hear some confusion in this room. And what I'm hearing is not just the numbers, but also the term rules, because the solid waste rules that were just updated and passed in New Hampshire are very complete, very detailed, and they cover a lot of the aspects of solid waste, from siting to operations to design and to closure. And in many ways, I would agree with the department that they have done a yeoman's job on updating these rules to be as protective as possible from the standpoint of engineering and design. What we're really talking about here is the issue of locating, siting, determining where the next landfill will be in New Hampshire, which will be with us for a good 100 years. In my career, I have worked in 11 states on landfills as a hydrogeologist. And if there's one thing that's common to all of those is that there's contamination in the ground. I've not found a landfill yet in my 40+ years career that didn't have releases of contaminants to the ground. And that in itself is not necessarily a great problem if the landfill is located in an area that has slow hydraulic conductivity. All that means is, what is this 10 to the minus 4, 10 to the minus 3 centimeter per second stuff? All that means is the speed or the rate at which groundwater can flow away from the site. So if you had a bucket of yuck, gasoline or whatever, and you were going to store it in your garage, would you put it inside a colander that's full of holes? Or would you put that bucket inside something solid, something concrete, a building or whatever? It's the concept that you're creating with a landfill, you create a source of contamination for decades that need to be managed. And our rules talk about that very, 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 very well. But when it does get outside of the managed infrastructure, Where does it go? Well, it travels with groundwater. And if you have a site where groundwater travels at 3, 4, 5 feet per day, that 500-foot setback doesn't give you even 6 months of breathing time before it can hit a surface water body. Everybody here wants protection of our water resources. So why wouldn't you want to locate your next landfill, which hopefully will be your last for maybe 100 years based upon the solid waste plan for reducing, et cetera, redirecting your waste. So why wouldn't you want to locate that in an area of slow groundwater movement? And so the two pieces that I see in House Bill 707 that is trying to get at that, and it's trying to give DES a tool where they point to the fact that they say, well, we'll never cite another landfill if it's located somewhere where we can't determine and investigate and pull back any contamination that may hit the surface water. That's great. Well, can they do that in 6 months? Well, their current rules would allow them to cite the next landfill on sand and 500 feet from a surface water body. That's 6 months or a year max, because I would agree with Director Wimsatt that groundwater speed isn't exactly the same speed that leachate would travel at, but the more permeable, the more this higher hydraulic conductivity, the cleaner the soil. The reason House Bill 707 talks about 10 to the minus 4 centimeters per second, because that's silty sand. That's glacial till. That's 80% of what covers our state. Now, other states certainly require clay. Maine requires clay. A lot of states require clay. That's your 10 to the minus 6, 10 to the minus 7 rate for the site. We're not saying that in House Bill 707 because glacial till can meet the 10 to the minus 4 centimeters per second. That's 0.3 feet per day. So that even would meet, if we could cite the next landfill at a property that has 10 to the minus 4 centimeters per second, it would actually meet that 500-foot distance that is already written into the rules, which I think is quite arbitrary because site-specific time of travel is really what we need. But it would actually meet that. So the takeaway from these rules is really the siting. And it's about where do you want to put your next and hopefully last facility that's going to create contamination for 100 years? And is it going to be somewhere where the contamination can easily move away and into your resources? Or is it somewhere where it's contained? Let Mother Nature help you contain the contamination that's going to be generated by this. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. On the previous bill, the representative from Sanborn had pointed out that my water bottle would eventually leak. But the point at which it would leak could be influenced, couldn't it, by if I ran over it with a car or I put acid in it versus just having what I hope is pure alpine spring water in it. So it's not an absolute when it's going to leak is my question. It's what the other factors influencing when it's going to leak are.
Leakage from a landfill site is affected by many, 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 many factors. And the first thought that a lot of people have is it leaking through that double liner system, and has that somehow been punctured or compromised because of rocks or something in it? But landfill sites are complicated. They're full of infrastructure. There's piping and pumps and sumps and staging areas and truck pads. And the reality is, and a lot of people handle and work with the liquid that's created at a landfill. So Leakins needs to be thought of as the site and not just the landfill envelope of the waste, because we create hundreds of millions of gallons of leachate, the landfill juice, at a site. And it can't just sit there. It's collected and it's stored and it's offloaded and it's handled. And that's a lot of the places where we have leaks during the life of the operations of the landfill. So I take your question that, yes, how you handle the waste, if you can crush it or not, or burn it up and create it as ash and put that in the landfill, that all changes how the contaminants can leave that portion of the landfill. But think of it as the totality of the site. What about all the other aspects of it? And that's why the site, the location, the characteristics of the materials in that location can either help you keep contamination at the site, or it can hurt you because it allows it to leave. And I think in the state of New Hampshire, because we do have lovely waters and rivers and resources here, we want to keep it contained. That's what makes most sense. And so let's pick a location that's in glacial tilt, 10 to the minus 4 centimeters per second.
So with existing landfills and the expansions, will this apply to that though? I mean, if you...
I believe that that was not the intent, that it was not intended to apply to any existing, already operating landfill sites. That this is only to change the rules to apply to a new landfill. That was my understanding. But I was not part of writing this, so I think you should continue to ask that question of the legislators who wrote it.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
All right, we have 2 more speakers. Sean Mulholland. What? Okay. Can you take over for a second? I gotta use the restroom. Yeah, I'll be right back.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Sean Mulholland. I'm the city manager for the city of Lebanon. We presently operate a landfill. We have about 5 years left on the capacity of that landfill, and then we will be out of business if we can't expand. We're in the process of submitting our application for expansion into what we refer to as Phase 3. So the city presently has Phase 1, which is an unlined landfill, and Phase 2, which is a lined landfill. Our plan is to excavate the Phase 1 unlined landfill that is leaking into the ground and take the materials out of it and put it into a lined landfill so that we don't impact the environment more negatively than we already have. We're concerned about the provisions of this bill and how that would affect us, our ability to do just that. I'm not going to reiterate the comments that were made by the advocate for waste management. We have similar concerns, or the same concerns that they do. But in addition to that, I'll refer to a couple of other sections that we're concerned about. And that is Section 19 regarding 24/7 coverage. The city of Lebanon is not a $1 billion operation. We are significantly smaller than that. We have great difficulty in this labor market in hiring people just to work in the daytime at the landfill, never mind on weekends and 24 hours a day and holidays. As a practical matter, I think sensors would be more appropriate. Video, those sorts of things monitored at a remote site would be actually more effective. I would suggest to you that if I was able to actually hire people to do this, which I am very concerned that that would be almost impossible to do in the labor market up in the Upper Valley. But if I were able to hire people, I suspect after a weekend and then at about 3 o'clock in the morning, early Monday morning, what do we think that that employee would be doing that's sitting there at the landfill by him or herself? I suspect they would probably be sleeping. That assumes I can actually find somebody. So I'm not sure what it is they're supposed to see or what they're supposed to do at 3 o'clock in the morning, assuming they're actually awake, and assuming I can actually hire somebody in the first place to do that, which I don't think I can because again, I can't even staff it during the daytime. I'm also concerned about the provision regarding airports that's written into the bill. It applies to certain smaller airports, but I don't know what those are. Doesn't say in here. So you would be enacting those provisions from federal law into state law, and I don't think we know what the consequences of that. My airport is very close to the landfill. In fact, most of the landfills in the state, to my knowledge, are very close to airports. And there are provisions in federal law that waivers and exemptions, but that's not spoken about here at all. So I'm concerned about creating two sets of law on that and why that's necessary in this particular bill. And that's all I have. I know you folks have a busy day.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Any questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you. Eric Steinhauser. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Senator Pearl. Thank you for acknowledging me once again. For the record, my name is Eric Steinhauser. I'm a Senior Vice President with Sanborn Head and Associates, a New Hampshire-based geoenvironmental firm. Just quickly about me, for the record, I'm a licensed professional engineer. The written testimony being passed out is co-written with my colleague Timothy White, a professional geologist in New Hampshire. Our firm works on many of the landfills and other sites in the state. We work for the private and public entities, as well as we consult to DES and DOT. I have almost 40 years of experience in landfills and site remediation projects. And I'm also on the Waste Management Council representing the licensed professionals, and I'm on the Solid Waste Working Group representing the Waste Management Council. My testimony is written, and as I will deliver today, is mine and doesn't represent a client, a project, or any of the councils or groups that I happen to be blessed to be on. Realizing time is short, I will say we're in opposition to this bill for many reasons. We go through detail in our written. I won't emphasize too much, but I want to just talk about a couple of specific things. One of the concern is that the difference between policy, statute, rules. If the goal is to have stronger rules, and that's a DES process, and by making it a law, a statute, that's a different level of a bar to attend. At least in the rules, if there's a hardship or some other item that comes up in a design, we have the ability to work with DES and stakeholders to get a waiver, an acceptable waiver for that. If it's a law, we can't. So the question about the 1,500 feet or the 5-year travel time, the way the bill is written, it's a 1,500 feet minimum or the greater of the 5-year travel time. And it's some confusion on the numbers, as Ms. Robinette had explained. It's not just the one value, it's how the site, the logistics of the site and groundwater flows and gradient and what is actually happening at the site. The concern really is what release are we dealing with? So leakage from landfills, lined landfills is, from my understanding, in the state and elsewhere, there isn't any documented leak from a lined landfill that is under current rules like New Hampshire has. The groundwater impacts that we're seeing is from the unlined landfills. As Mr. Mulholland had mentioned, they want to actually mine a landfill to get rid of that kind of issue, but we need a place to put that waste. The provision about having someone on site with the idea that they're going to identify a release is a little problematic, because most of the works on site that would relate to a release would be when there's people on site already. In the comment about something happening at 3 a.m. to see if there's a leak in a liner system is just not going to happen. There's comment about putting your gasoline in a solid container. The way the rules are written in New Hampshire, the lined landfill is a solid container. They're heavily designed and regulated, and they serve that purpose of being a solid container. So the applicability of many of these provisions here are finding a solution for a problem that I'm not sure exists. Well, we always want to have good rules that are protective. The rules we have are protective now, and you can always add to that with the thought that they make them more protective, but at what point are they not serving the purpose? So my analogy would be an airplane. We've all flown in an airplane and probably don't like the turbulence. So we can set a criteria that an airplane cannot experience turbulence in flight. And we can set that as a rule, but what will happen is we won't have any airplanes flying because that's just a rule that can't be achieved. So I fear that some of the provisions on here are going to set up a situation where existing and proposed landfills can't meet the criteria. In particular is the 20-foot thickness of native soil below the landfill. There's talk of maps. I haven't seen these maps about what percentage area is developable or not. But as Director Wimsatt said, you have to look at the rules holistically. So not only the horizontal setbacks and buffers that we need to maintain, there's vertical restrictions as well. And in aggregate, when you take all that together, be able to expand or a new landfill would be sited. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The lone survivors, I see. I've enjoyed the conversation. I've learned from the conversation. I don't know if my question should come from DES or from this gentleman, but I'll start here. And I haven't seen the map that we're speaking of either, but I have some familiarity on what soil looks like for the first 12 feet in the ground. Seeing my profession is septic. And I know the difference of when I'm working on the coast, where I run into, in my profession, those wonderful clay structures, and how difficult it is for me to do my business in that. I know that when I go up to Colebrook, I get into soil that hasn't even developed as much as it has in Coos County, and it's a harder material. It would seem to me that once the map is identified and communities see that possibly they have the best darn soil, subsoil here for a landfill, I've got to believe there's going to be an outrage from that community. I know that, and I'm going to tie this back to septic, and this is a much bigger, technology evolves all the time. And we, to build a system that just takes care of effluent, nitrates, phosphates, now we're worried about PFAS, we will bring in materials to make that location better to do that. I see that in one of your points here, talking about paragraph 10, I guess, it's on, or 20 on your point here. And I keep hearing in the conversation today that no imported fill should be allowed. And it just seems like an unreasonable standard, knowing that technology improves, and more safeguards can be put on when those are put in. Think about trying to build a house next to a lake. You can't just put pylons into the ground. You have to supplement it. You have to compact and everything else. So I guess my question is, on the imported fill, I think that's an unreasonable standard. Would you agree with that or not, sir?
Thank you for that, Senator. I agree. I think the import of fill, that we can control how it's placed and measure its in-place permeability, is the way to go. And again, I don't know specifically the rules that were related to the 1 times 10 to the -7, whether that's for actual in-situ soil or constructed liner systems. Federal rule requires, as a minimum, one geomembrane layer on top of a 10 to the -7, I think it's 1 or 2 foot thick soil layer. That's a constructed layer, not a natural layer. different states, including New Hampshire, can modify that to make it more protective, which in New Hampshire we have 2 geomembrane layers and leak detection layers, and now a 2-foot thick layer of soil that's, I think, 10 to minus 4 or 5 permeability. I don't remember exactly, but we are putting engineered soils in as part of the liner system. I think this, although we don't say it, this provision would contradict that requirement as well. So there's a lot of problems with when you put this thing holistically together. And the fact that some of the provisions are citing criteria with regard to the hydrogeology, some are design criteria. And based on my experience with the new rule change, recently the design criteria carries through to existing landfills. They have to meet, the way the permits are written are that you have to meet the rules in place at the time when you go to construction. So if I constructed something in 2024, it was the old rules. I construct something in 2025 or beyond, it's the new rules. And we had a project, we had to redesign the whole liner system to meet the new rules.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. I'm Nancy Morrison. I've lost some of my audience. I'm not going to take that personally much. All right. Okay. Thank you, Senator McConkey and Chairman Avard, for hearing me today. It's been a long morning, so this is brief. I'd like to say, in my opinion, that the tide is turning on addressing waste management reform in New Hampshire. And I ask you this morning to ride that wave by voting ought to pass on House Bill 707. I applaud Governor Ayotte, the House, and the members of New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services for supporting the previous bill discussed here this morning, H. Bill 171. It is clear it is the right time for a 3-year slowdown on new landfill construction, as New Hampshire does not have a capacity need for decades to come. And the list of ramifications from a new landfill carries sobering, complicated, and long-lasting consequences. However, when the moratorium does end, if and when a new landfill is necessary, the safety of New Hampshire citizens and the environment rests on where that landfill will be located. Location, 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 as the best realtor would tell you. House Bill 707 adds that vital element of site-specific setback criteria based on testing soil composition, as has been so eloquently stated already. This science makes clear how long it takes contaminated water to travel through soil, making it possible to locate a landfill a safe enough distance from water depending on the soil composition. The best design, the best technology, the toughest double and triple liners will not protect us from eventual landfill punctures, as have been experienced in New Hampshire, as well as toxic leachate spills outside the liner area. What is crucial is understanding the travel time of contamination. Please support House Bill 707. It is based on science, has been studied well by the House, and amended with the help of DES. And thank you for being open-minded and proactive on this addition to the updated solid waste rules. The positive repercussions of your decision to support a site-specific setback criteria for a new landfill will reverberate with the people of New Hampshire, the communities, and the environment for generations to come. Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to close the hearing on 707. Seconded by Senator McCarthy. So let's discuss 707 real quick. I think there's some good intent here. I do think I'm with you on the soil import. I think that's problematic for me. Also, the soil level going from 6 feet to 20 feet. That's something I think we need to work on. And in my humble opinion, of course, I'm not a hydrologist, that the 1,500-foot setback, I don't know. We'll talk to DES and see if that's something that's necessary. I don't know. It comes across arbitrary to me, but what are your thoughts on? You weren't here, so you're welcome.
Yeah, and I just, my only procedural thought, Mr. Chairman, is that because this is in the House Bill 2, that I think that Senate Finance would appreciate the guidance of a policy committee. And if we pass a version of any one of the bills, because there's several of the other ones that we've had, are Senate bills and House bills that are in the budget, and if we want to have a Senate position, then we ought to do it in a policy committee, and that will provide guidance to finance as to what happens there.
Okay.
As far as, I mean, we've talked about the issues in 707. I think it's important for us to do something. I think that, I don't know if waste management came up, but I think they're comfortable with the hydrology part of it. The other part, I mean, we're going to listen to folks, but I hope to be able to do something. That's my thought on this. I do hope so.
I think we can work something out. I do think we should take some time and just figure out some of these issues. But and I appreciate your input on that, because you deal with this indirectly with septic. So we'll wait for Senator Pearl to come in. We'll discuss some more of the and Senator Rosenwald.
May I say a couple words on 171?
Absolutely.
Yeah, same thing. Procedurally on 171, I do have an amendment that basically takes the 14 pages from House Bill 2 that are 707 and what was 215, but is, basically, the governor had language about establishing a site evaluation committee. A lot of good work was done in the House to get that site evaluation committee set up. They're both kind of interwoven in House Bill 2. And so I have an amendment that would be replace all, so that we would have a policy position. And I think if we just passed it as was, the House would concur and we could get this to the governor's desk and not have it, occupying the time of the finance committee. And I'm just speaking for myself. I think that the work that's been done, the governor said the 1 year, now we got the 3 year on the moratorium, the work that was done on how to set up that site evaluation committee, which I think really ensures that municipalities get really 2 bites at the apple in that process. And, whatever we do about 707 or other policy things, that will all funnel through that SEC. And I think that, is appropriate and a good way to go. It's just procedurally, I think it might be cleaner to have it be because we have 171 here, have the full thing be a policy bill we could pass, get to the governor, and who knows what's going to happen with the budget. So that's just procedurally my thoughts on that.
Thank you. I was interested to hear Town of Lebanon's testimony and what they're doing, and I'm sure there are other communities that I'm not aware of. And I kept hearing in the testimony of both bills, how does this affect existing facilities? And I keep hearing, well, we think it doesn't. I want it clear. I want it clear in the language of both of these, whether it does or doesn't. So we don't get in a point that it's unclear. I think we need to make that clear. Transportation cost everything. So if we have some facilities that, like Town of Lebanon, if they can handle their waste and others can, and they can do it in a safe manner, and it's already there, then let's make it clear in these 2 laws.
Mr. Chairman, on that point about exceptions for existing, could we have Mike Wimsatt come up for a second on that? Because I did ask him about, just to clarify, and that's why I also had the question asked of Mr. Veyu about waste management's comfort with that. But could you speak to the exceptions for existing?
I can try, and I want to preface my remarks by saying I'm not enough of a statutory scholar to be the last word on this. So I think Oleska, I think, could shed some light on this. But my understanding is that the concern, and I've talked to Henry about this, Henry Vea testified earlier that he thought that the facility that he represents might be not exempted by this. And the way I read the bill, it says at that important line that in this section, new landfill means, and then it exempts existing facilities. Section, as I understand it in statutory nomenclature, is the number after the colon. And everything that addresses in this bill, every part of the statute that's amended to talk about citing criteria, setbacks, et cetera, are in section 9 in 149M9. So I believe, and again, this should be checked with people who are a lot smarter than me, but I believe that by saying in this section, new landfill means something, that means for anything contained in the section. So I actually believe, based on my analysis here, sitting here this morning, and what I understand about the nomenclature, that the exemption provided for new facilities extends to all the additional citing criteria that have been laid out in this bill. That's my understanding.
We can put it in language, we'll make it more explicit.
Maybe talk to Rick Lehman.
Yeah, we can talk to him.
This is important.
Yeah.
It is important to be clear. I think the language is clear, but if it's not clear enough.
All right. And, yeah, so, we want the other two here to discuss it. There is another bill that you had an amendment for.
Yeah, I think why don't, on 672, but why don't we, there's some further conversation I think Griffin wants to have with Representative Bowes on the nature of the amendment on the community generators. So unless, we're not meeting next week. We're not having session on the 24th.
No, we can exec it.
We could exec it that next Tuesday and have it for the following week, so if that's okay.
That's okay. You want to talk about anything else right now?
I'm set, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so with that, is there a motion to move out of exec?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. And how many bills I got left? 3? 123 is going to get pushed out to the very, very end.
Okay. I'm going to make 2 other FNs.